Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 55 of Underserved. Today, we are featuring Chris Hull, co-founder and chief product officer at Otus. Let's get started.
Welcome to this week's edition of Underserved, the podcast for the rest of the tech industry, where we focus on stories of tech industry leaders, their insights, and their lessons learned. And now, your host, Andrew Jelina.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us today on Underserved.
Really excited to be here. I got to get that guy's voice, man. I know my voice doesn't sound as good as your intro guy. That guy's got a voice that's incredible.
You will find him and many other talented folks on Fiverr, Fiverr. So how did you get interested in technology way back in the day?
Yeah, I first became interested in technology. I was a sports fan growing up. I liked to play soccer or flag football outside, but I really got interested into the technology playing video games. I used to play Tecmo Bowl on the original Nintendo. I actually still have my Nintendo. I can still play it. It's pretty fun. I was always the Chicago Bears. I'm from the Chicago area. It was really great to play that game growing up with Walter Payton and Singletary and be there to be able to shut people down on defense, stop Bo Jackson. That's really when I started to get into technology and the games and continue to like Madden and things like that until I was older and just looked for entertainment, ways to enjoy my time.
So you weren't a huge fan of education until you hit college, right? What changed there?
Yeah. So for me, when I was growing up, I went to a really large high school and I really just wanted to fly under the radar. I really didn't find the teaching and learning all that appealing to me. I like to do things on my own. I had a couple of really cool teachers along the way. I had a 7th grade English teacher, Mrs. Balliot, who got me into reading. And that really sparked an interest for me to read what I was passionate about. But I sometimes found that what was being taught in school was not what interested me. But when I went to college to play basketball, and that was really a focus. But I found 2 professors, Dr. Woodyard and Dr. Capps, who became my advisors, and they really sparked this understanding that if we're able to learn, if we take that and we direct it in the right way, it's really powerful. And they really directed my passion to learn, which I always felt I had. And they really showed me that education could be something that could be had by anyone. And looking back at my time in both school as a kid, but also my time in college, I really began to realize that it was the teachers who could unlock this potential. And so even though as a student myself, I wasn't always the best performer, it really opened my eyes that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to unlock this potential in others. And that's kind of why I became a 7th and 8th grade social studies teacher, to really be able to help kids reach those aha moments that I sometimes had while reading books or learning on my own, but also that some of my teachers provided. There was nothing like that. And so even though I wasn't the biggest fan growing up, it's something that I really have now dedicated my life to in terms of trying to be an educator or helping educators.
So while you were an educator, what did you find great and what did you find difficult about the role? I know the great part was probably the aha moments. Was there anything you were frustrated by?
Yeah, I feel like when you talk to teachers, my sister is a special education teacher currently and really still have a lot of friends who are in the classroom. And everyone will talk about this aha moment, right? The aha moment is energizing. It's incredible. But the question is like, how far are we between those aha moments and what's the pain points there? And educators really struggle with being tasked with so many administrative things they have to do. They have to take attendance. They have to check in on these notes. They have to do all of these tasks for all of their kids. I had 150 kids. So if I had to do 10 tasks per kid, all of a sudden you're talking about 1,500 tasks a day. And those administrative tasks took away from the time that is required to focus on the teaching and the learning, the ability to know who a kid is. And sometimes I think we try to be too efficient. We want to cram full all of this teaching and learning into a set amount of time. I used to be in 40-minute periods. So in 7th grade, you'd be in class for 40 minutes. We actually had something called a block period. I'll kind of leave that aside. But you'd be connecting to kids. And I found that during the pandemic, when everything was turned into remote learning, one of the biggest realizations I had was when talking to my neighbors, talking to the people in schools, people expected kids to be learning from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., like every minute of the day. It's like, I need a jam pack. And it's like stepping back and really reflecting on it as a teacher, you have to understand, and I think this is the case in any industry, you need to be able to have those ability to connect to a kid. Let's ask a question. How was your weekend? How's it going? Well, that's not really getting into, I taught about the Constitution. We're not talking about some of the founding fathers, philosophies and things that they wanted to do, but it's important to take the time. And if you have 20 kids in a class, you might want to take 5 to 8 minutes just on a welcome introduction, just on that connection. Or maybe I had something called a daily problem. So the kids would enter my room and they'd start by writing. I think writing is essential, very important. But during that time, I would be walking around talking to the kids. Maybe somebody was a Bears fan. Oh man, did you see how well Justin Fields played last week? When we're talking to kids, we need to be able to build in that time to connect. And I really find that teachers aren't provided that time to do that work. And instead, they're told to do all of these other things. They got to do scope and sequence of what are we teaching, when are we teaching it, how are we teaching it. Then they have to be measuring all these things. And they have to report to their principal. And then they have to send something to the secretary. All of that takes away from the need to connect to kids, get them to feel comfortable so that they can engage in learning, which is something that's difficult. Learning is difficult. And we need to be able to provide the support and the time to make it really happen.
Yeah, I remember when was it like March 13th was like a Friday in 2020, I think, the pandemic. And then everyone's like, all right, starting Monday, everyone's at home. And my kids' school, their hearts were in the right place. They're like, all right, 8:35 a.m., we're going to be on Zoom Monday and we're going to do Zoom classes all day long. And the kids were literally on 7 Zooms from 8 to 3, like you said. And I think for both the kids and the teachers, it was a bit brutal. I think that lasted only 3 or 4 weeks. And then they figured out, all right, let's pump the brakes and figure out some ways to not just try to jam all instruction in there, but have some sort of connection as well.
And that's what it is, right? When you talk about other industries, you got to be able to have that time to learn who people are. In the tech industry, we have a lot of one-on-ones. Well, you don't want your one-on-one to be all about like this project, drive efficiency. No, you want to be able to build that rapport with people. And that rapport is important because there are times where, we might have a difficult task or a difficult project in front of us. We want to be able to really dig in because we have that trust and that rapport built.
So you're teaching social studies to middle schoolers. Was there kind of a moment when you're like, you know what, I'm going to do something about these things that frustrate me. I got to build something.
Yeah. So, going back to Tech Mobile and why I got interested into technology, I always thought of myself as a hack or I used to play Punch Out. And it's like, how do I beat the game or how do I get ahead? I always wanted to find something that would make me more efficient or more effective at what I was doing. So when I first started teaching, I replaced this absolute legend in the district. I actually just met the other day her granddaughter. It's kind of crazy. It was this really small world. She was still in the town that her grandmother taught in, but her grandmother, her name was Mrs. Levy. She was my mentor, but she was an incredible woman. She would do these incredible things with the students, and she did them for 30 plus years in the district. She was able to read every student's journal. Again, 150 kids. She would read them every 2 weeks. She would leave handwritten notes in these journals to get that connection. Again, the emphasis on writing. The idea is if you can write, you can think, you can communicate. But she really wanted them to know that she was reading these words and these posts and these things that were in this notebook. And I remember going about it going like, how am I going to lug around 150 notebooks every 2 weeks? Like, this is not feasible for what I wanted to do. I wanted to play basketball on the side. I wanted to coach, but I still wanted to have that connection with my kids. So I began to look to technology as a way to make me, again, more effective and efficient by being a time hack. How can I do this? Well, I realized if my kids were on devices, occasionally they could write blog posts. And those blog posts I could access on my phone. Or maybe I could access them anytime while I'm watching a game. And all of a sudden, I'm not lugging 150 notebooks in. I'm just on my computer, leaving comments on a blog post. Or maybe they would use Google Docs and I could leave comments in the thread while we're working on their writing. It became much more efficient to me. And so in the pursuit of this efficiency, again, going back to this idea that educators have all these administrative tasks, I was realizing I was doing these tasks in 12, 15 different places. I would take attendance here and grade here and jump for something else here or look up a student information somewhere else. And I'm like, this is too cumbersome. I need a single place where I can gather this information. I can communicate this information. And, when we look at other industries, we have these things like CRMs, or in the medical industry, we have these medical profiles. You need a place where multiple doctors or multiple stakeholders can leave information, create this profile so that when you look at the profile, what is the history, what is the present, what are they trying to do? And I began to build, and with, amazing other co-founders, amazing other team members, we began to build Otus. And Otus is this platform that allows you to teach, grade, analyze, and plan. It allows you to do all those things in the same place so that you're able to build this really rich source of information about a kid. So that when I'm a 7th grade teacher who is in social studies and I talk to the English teacher, we're on the same page. Or if I was a 7th grade teacher and I needed to know, hey, what was happening to this kid in 4th or 5th grade? We were on the same page. And it allows for this collaboration and this understanding, which I really think can help drive and maximize learning for each kid. But it was, again, technology was a way for me to try to just replicate what people before me had done so well and try for me to do it more effectively and efficiently to save myself so I could watch some Bears or play some Tecmo Bowl or Madden to be more efficient with my time.
Well, we call that good lazy in the software development industry. A good developer has a habit where if he or she has to do some task over and over, they're like, I got to build a tool to do this so that I can have time to go watch the Bears or manage my fantasy football team.
I like that. A good lazy. I just sometimes call myself lazy, but I like to put in the good lazy is a helpful thing. I went to Time Hack, but that doesn't quite get it. I'm going to have to steal that. Good lazy is a good way of describing it.
Go right ahead. There's bad lazy, like sitting around on the couch all day, eating Cheetos. And there's good lazy, like, I got to figure out a way to make this easier.
You are listening to the Underserved podcast. Underserved is produced by Syrinx, the developer-founded, developer-run software consulting company. For more information, visit syrinx.com. That's SYRINX.com.
So how did you meet your co-founders and how are they involved in the company?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the co-founders was the 6th grade social studies teacher, and he and I would often just lament about the world we lived in. And it was like, man, what if we could do X, Y, Z? What if we could take the platforms we're currently using and how would we modify them? How would we do them differently? What would really drive better learning for our kids? And he and I had these conversations for months, and they're some of my favorite memories of like really talking about not only what was a pain point, or the question I like to think of, what was more difficult than it needs to be, but also then thinking of like, how would we solve that? And serendipity or coincidence happened to where the 8th grade English teacher in our building was high school friends with a Chicago businessman named Andy Bloom. And Andy Bloom is an absolutely incredible guy. He and his family are known in the Chicagoland area, but he had 3 boys of his own. And he realized what we described as a problem when he was looking into what is educational technology. Is there an opportunity here? He realized, he was like, wait, I have 3 boys. They're in the middle school area range. One of them was in elementary. They were like between 4th grade and 9th grade. It's like, I get this. This problem's real. You're telling me that there isn't a CRM or there isn't this universal medical profile. There is nothing out there like that. There is nothing with this rich data. You kind of see it at the Ferris Bueller's Day Off movie where it's like, it's going to go into your permanent record. Well, what is that permanent record? It was kind of surprising to see. It's kind of superficial. It's kind of very high level. It doesn't really dive into what really can be helpful for pushing learning forward. And so he heard it and he joined the 3 of us. Pete, he's now an administrator and he's doing a great job. He helps Otus in, keeping us informed of what's happening in his district. But we really began with Andy's foresight, his vision, and his dedication. We've been able to build a team. We've been able to grow Otus. It started off, Andy was invested in an offshore development company. So we kind of built a first iteration. We were able to iterate on it. We were able to take some of these practices, like Agile, see what are the feedback, create these infinity loops of, hey, we see this, we work with educators. And we were able to build our team. And so, currently we're at about 80 people at Otus. We were in over 225 districts. And it's really been a crazy journey to go from a first conversation that happened all the way back on 2012 on Leap Day. And to think about a conversation that lasted a year where we're talking back and forth, brainstorming back and forth. And we really began to build what became Otus in 2013. To think that was 8 years ago now is really kind of mind-blowing, even for a history teacher where I like to think of time and timelines. But Andy's super active. He served as our CEO for a while, but we really have exciting news that we're right in the midst of. We just hired, and we have somebody, Deepak is joining us as our new CEO, and he's really going to continue to push us forward. It's a really exciting time for us because it's really great to see just starting where we were, and now we're in almost 40 states. It's kind of mind-blowing. As I mentioned, I'm rambling here, but I ran into that granddaughter of my mentor, and she was asking, like, what are you doing? Are you still teaching? And it was like, whoa, that was just a couple years ago I last saw you. And it's like, this is incredible to think how far this has come.
So you've told us a little bit about what Otus does, and when I picture it, it kind of makes sense to me. We used SalesForce for a while as CRM to help us remember all of our interactions with prospects and customers and know from engagement to engagement or from year to year what the kind of continuous story was. Is that kind of the core of Otus? And then what do you also offer around that?
Yeah. So, the real differentiator is that, idea of creating a really robust and rich profile for each kid, which then can also give you information on groups of kids where you can link. What about kids who are fifth graders, or what about fifth grade males, or what about the football players, or what about the dancers, or what about the ones who are really passionate about art? So you're able to collect this information, and then you're able to see trends or be able to understand the effectiveness of programs. And we really do that because Otus is a platform that provides the ability to, as I said, to teach, which really is a pain point sometimes, where it's like, how do I facilitate learning? So how do I facilitate it if we're in a remote atmosphere, or if we're in person, or what if I have somebody out? How do I facilitate that? So we help with those tools, which sometimes are known as a learning management system. And we provide that learning management system set of tools. We also provide the tools so you can measure the learning that is taking place with your kids. That could be social emotional learning. That could be academic learning. And that's the bucket we call grade. We use that term grading because it's, again, when you talk to educators, it's like, man, I have to grade all these papers. And we like to really address the pain points teachers have. And so we try to make grading more efficient, but we also try to make it more effective. So also reliable and valid, so that we are more accurately measuring what is the kid learning. If we're only measuring what a kid has learned once a month, or once every 8 weeks, or once every 2 months, 3 months, you're not getting that continuous understanding of where a kid is, because kids change so dramatically from day to day, from week to week. We don't want to overburden them with assessments all the time. These are really more like quick checks. Like, hey, this is just like a question or two. Or maybe while you're observing a kid, you might be measuring their ability to multiply fraction. Or you might be, again, I have 4 kids who are quite young, so I might be measuring their ability to do A/B patterns. And then we also have the ability in Otus to analyze. And this is really the ability of our data analytics, data visualization, so that you can see this, so that you're not just looking at anecdotal things, narrative things, you can put it all together. And the final bucket of Otus is this idea of being able to plan. You have this information, you've taught, you've measured learning, you've analyzed it. Well, what do you do next? What are we going to do? You want to be able to plan your next steps, and you want to monitor your progress to the goals that you have. And we think that these buckets in one place allow all this information to be gathered more seamlessly, and allow educators to better collaborate together, and hopefully leads to better student outcomes.
Thank you so much for joining the Zoom panel interview for our software development position. My apologies for having to reschedule it 7 times.
Hey, no worries. Ready to get this underway.
Let me introduce the panel members from our company. First is...
Whoever that is, can you please mute?
Sorry, that was me. Mailman's here.
Hey, you guys hear me? Can you see me? My kid is playing Fortnite and my bandwidth is sapped.
Hey, sorry, I was on mute. Hi, this is Connor Walton.
Can everyone who is not talking please mute yourself?
Sorry, so where were we?
Yeah, so the main reason I joined was to let you know that I accepted a job offer from your competitor this morning. Sorry, your process just took too long. Laters.
Does this drill sound all too familiar to you? If so, you should call Syrinx. Syrinx helps you complete your projects on time and on budget. So stop the Zoom calls and start shipping code today. Call us at 888-579-7469 option 1 or email us at sales@syrinx.com. That's sales@syrinx.com.
Well, I really like the idea too of the rapport building and just kind of ramping things up. Like if my daughter Nancy is in 8th grade and likes singing and soccer and all these other things, and then starts 9th grade, her 9th grade teachers know from the notes in the system, like, hey, these are some of the things she's into, and you don't have to start from scratch every year getting to know your students.
Right. And I think that's the key, right? When you talked about your daughter Nancy, you're not going to unlock everything, but if you know something she's passionate about, it allows you just to talk a little bit. I'm a big basketball fan. And when I found a kid who was really into basketball, let's talk about percentages with Steph Curry. How many threes is he going to make? Well, we can use percentages. We can begin to talk about that. I also would watch shows like Project Runway and things like that. Making these analogies to things that they are passionate about can really help them understand what is being taught.
And how do you surface the information and testing and results to people? And are there any kind of unexpected lessons you learned about sharing all the grading with folks?
Yeah, I think that's a question that makes me kind of laugh, because one of the mistakes I kind of made was the belief that what worked in my classroom or my district would be replicable everywhere. And there are amazing districts out there, and they want to do things that are going to fit their community. And so the biggest lesson I learned is this idea of, I truly believe in transparency. I believe in candor. I believe in hey, let's just lay the cards out on the table. I actually play games with my kids where they're very young, so we'll do all cards on the table. So we all can see, we can teach, we can learn. I like that approach. But in working with districts, I was just on a call the other day with a district, and it's we at first would allow all information to be transparent to all stakeholders who had permission to see that kid. So we weren't sharing student data with the wrong people. But if I have a student, let's use your daughter as an example. If Nancy's in a class and the teacher all of a sudden gives an assessment and it's auto graded, if all of a sudden that grade is available instantaneously, all of a sudden you, who care so much about your daughter's learning, you might dive in and be like, well, what happened? What's going on? You're now asking the teacher, and the teacher's like, I just gave this assessment today. It's only been an hour. I've been teaching all day. I haven't been able to analyze. I haven't been able to look at the results. So we've heard and we've learned that there are some bits of information. This is especially true on these big assessments. We work with a great company called NWEA and other companies like SBAC. They're all great to help districts understand how a kid's doing. Well, if we look at this, if the information is generated in this moment, some districts want time to say, hey, let's analyze it together. We got it today. Let's give our teachers 72 hours to review, to understand, to ask questions of it. And then, hey, we can talk about it. That was a real big lesson to me. And it's something that we call toggles or switches. And right, we want to put a toggle on this for a little bit. So we're not going to release it immediately. We want there to be a review process and then for it to be released. And that was something I didn't quite realize, but was really something that I found really helpful to learn.
Yeah. In my kids' soccer, they have a thing where if you have questions about a game or didn't like something or want to talk about playtime or whatever, coaches say, wait 24 hours before contacting us. And better yet, let the kids advocate for themselves once they get to be 11, 12 years old. It's time for them to start learning this. Is there anything like self-advocacy or any sort of collaboration or feedback built into the system?
Your coach is doing a great thing. That's definitely good advice, I think, for all parents out there, families out there. It's like the sleep on it rule, right? You take the 24 hours, I got to sleep on this, got to become level-headed. We believe that Otus provides that opportunity for all the students themselves to be able to look at their learning, not just their final grade, but to be able to see the progress, to see the details. And, with my 7th and 8th graders, it made them better advocates. And we see that in that 7th grade to about end of high school, we're in the K-12 space. We see that possibility. We see that there can be more ownership. There's more insight. There's more understanding. And when you have insight and understanding and you become, again, back to the point I made earlier, when you become connected and invested in your own learning, that advocacy becomes much more real, much more possible, because you, want it to be real, but then also you can see it and you have questions you can ask instead of just, how am I doing in class? Or what do I need to do better? Well, you've actually gotten some of those. Now let's break it down. Again, it was one of my favorite moments when I was teaching is I would have one-on-ones with each of my kids. And it was great to be able to identify, hey, this is a goal we have. This is what we're going to work towards it. Let's check in. And the students then would be able to, hey, this is a goal I have. We'd add that. We'd work on that. And it really became a great way to see this progress. And when they have that ownership, it's just going to mean longer success for them.
You mentioned, was it NWEA, the assessment folks?
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the assessment companies we work with. Yep.
I imagine there's a bunch of other folks like content providers that you're integrating or pulling into your system. Who else do you kind of work with there?
Yeah, we really want to be content and assessment agnostic, right? We want to work with anybody and everybody. 40% of us are former educators. We come from a wide range of districts. We want districts to be empowered to use Otus's flexible platform to use the tools that they already want, the content they already want. We want to be able to connect to them because that type of ability for us to connect and to be flexible allows districts to do what has worked for them, because there are differences. So we work with any content group, any assessment group. We really want to work with them to get their information into Otus so that it streamlines the use of it. And when we work with these companies, it's amazing because if the teachers get access to the information more quickly, they'll actually use it more often. If I'm able to all of a sudden see a test result now in one place where I give everything else, I'm now going to refer to that result. I'm now going to use that result. It's now going to become not just a data point, but something that's actionable for us to use. And the same with content. If it's really easy for there to be a central place, we have this cool feature called Lessons where you get a playlist of activities. Well, when it becomes super easy to integrate, we are really good at like YouTube, Khan Academy, but also things like Pearson and other content providers. When it's super easy to add it, well, now that textbook isn't left in the locker. Now it's being used more frequently. Now it's being used more often. And it really brings a nice return on investment for these districts to be able to use the resources that they've purchased in a way that really is organized and helpful for everybody involved.
Are there any trends you've noticed in the 8 or so years, or more specifically in the past couple years, as we've gone from flying into fully remote COVID and now a lot of folks back in person? Any trends in education that you're seeing since you see across so many districts?
Yeah, I think that we've seen an understanding, especially after 18 months of real hardship and just, it's just a horrible time for so many people, that we've really had to see that we have to get back to the basics in some ways. And so we're seeing the first step is we have to re-engage kids to be invested in learning. A lot of them were able to kind of just coast last year, again, talking to high schoolers where the Zoom games or the TikTok games, the TikTok challenges of how did you get away with what with Zoom. So the step one is re-engaging with these kids to get them invested in their learning. Sadly, the dropout rates have increased. So this first step is re-engagement. And really the second trend that I've really seen is an increased focus on the skills involving reading and math. And this idea of being able to focus on the reading, the writing, the math, getting kids back into where are we? There's a term learning loss, but what has happened? We haven't had as many times where we've been able to interact with kids. Where are you? Socially, emotionally, but also with our basic skills. And one of the big things to me involving with that is, okay, we get kids back, we get them re-engaged. We're going to be focusing on these skills around reading, math, and writing. One of the things that the kids are sharing is, wow, now I have to do this work myself. In the past, last year, it was so easy to cheat. Cheating became so easy last year when it was all remote. There was no real proctoring. So now there's this realization of, okay, what type of assessments are going to be most effective? Are they multiple choice? I'm seeing much more work on, we have to get the kids to be expressing themselves, either through written work. Some people are doing videos where you can all of a sudden record yourself. But it's this understanding that we need to be able to hear the thinking and the thought, because just identifying ABC on a test isn't going to give me the best insight to how this kid's really doing. And so we're seeing this kind of increased focus on this ability to see where a kid's at with their written work and their thinking.
Does that make it harder to grade? I mean, obviously the plus side to the ABCDE is that you're a computerized answer key away from grading those 150 answers.
Yeah, and I think this is where we're getting into, you kind of need to have a balance of both, right? Grading papers is more difficult. It's also something where getting the reliability and validity is something you really have to ensure as a district you're working for. Grading can be hard. It's one of those things where sometimes if you're in a really bad mood or if you haven't read every paper yet, grading can be super hard. And so there's this knowledge that we need to do it. But educators, and for any educator listening, like, I'm so appreciative of the work that they do. They're the boots on the ground here. And it's incredible what they've had to go through, shifting from remote to hybrid to remote, putting themselves with this whole COVID situation, their health and things like that. So much is on their plate. And now they're being tasked with, again, connecting with kids who might now be a little bit more apathetic about being in school. And so the challenges that are mounting for educators are so high. And then this idea that we do need to do more of this authentic student work versus, standardized assessment to see where a kid's at. That balance is, again, pulling onto it. And I do hope that Otus is helpful in that efficiency piece for those that have Otus, and hoping for districts who don't, that something like Otus or mainly Otus can join. But I definitely think it's something for us all to consider as we get back into all of this changing world and the changing landscape we live in.
Now, you're mostly business in the United States to this point, and if so, how much are you having to do language support?
Yeah, so one of the things is we're mainly in the United States. That's really the main focus, but we really want to be able to get everyone involved so that the stakeholders, again, you mentioned that you're a father. Oftentimes you ask your kid, what's happening in school? The answer is not always the most descriptive. They might say they're doing things or they're learning stuff, or I didn't learn anything. I learned nothing today. Okay. So it's like giving that insight is really important. So one of the things we did is we actually translated the platform of Otus, not the user entered data, but the platform into 30 plus languages, because we want the families involved to be able to have this support. We want to be able to provide this insight and support to all families. And it's really been this is one of the things we just released in the past 6 to 9 months. And it's so exciting that we're able to achieve this, because my kids live in a district, they're actually in a dual language school. It's so important to be able to engage with people in their native language, especially families who are trying to support their kids. Again, learning's hard. Parenting's even harder. With 4 kids myself, there are moments where it's like, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into? So we really try to support our families with this language translation.
Now, the company name is spelled Otus. Where did you guys come up with it?
Yeah, so it was really funny. If anybody's ever had to go around naming something, it's actually a really difficult process. And we had an original name. We ran into a copyright issue and we wanted to launch, and we had like 48 to 72 hours to come up with it. And the story of how it was created is kind of funny, because one person involved in the process, our marketing consultant at the time, thought of Otus, the owl, that, it's a species of owl, the wisdom that was provided. In my delirium of trying to come up with a name and throwing out so many, we had an entire spreadsheet that was hundreds of rows of what we would consider. I mistakenly thought that it was an acronym for organizing technology for us. And this idea that we had all this technology out there, we had to organize it for us. Not the smartest person out there. So I didn't know that it was a type of owl. I was like, oh man, this is a cool acronym. I also like the personification. It's like a person's name. And so really for us, it's now become internally, we originally had an owl logo. If you look back in the day, this is like when we first started, we moved away from that logo. And really we see us as that internal moniker of like, we're organizing technology for us. And that's all the stakeholders involved in education, putting things into an organized way so that we can do the tasks we have in front of us.
So tell me a bit about you and your note-taking. What apps and things are you using to organize technology for you in particular?
Yeah, so one of the big passions I have is learning. And one of the things I've really found is the part of learning that I find the most fun currently is the ability to connect dots and the ability to connect an idea you might have read here or you might have heard here and synthesize that into a kind of something that makes sense for you. And I've gotten into this really cool note-taking habit using this app called Obsidian. And really, it's using this note-taking strategy called Zettelkasten, which this is now makes me feel like I'm talking another language. But the idea is, I read this really great book about talking about this working towards efficiency and making these connections. But the Zettelkasten system is really this ability to take notes. And Obsidian allows you to do these really cool connections to where all of a sudden when you're outlining these notes, and I really like to focus on, whenever I take a note, I like to focus on 5 basic questions of who is the note about, when is the note from, where was it, what is the note, what is the idea? Maybe it's a quote, maybe it's an idea, maybe it's a concept, maybe it's even a word. I think sometimes learning words is so important. I'm reading this great book called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker, and it's like certain words he comes up with. I'm like, oh man, I kind of want to research that. And one of the things for me is I want to be able to take that and connect it to things. And so you look at the what, and then you look at how does this connect? And so I have a section where it connects to different things. And all of a sudden, then it's like, why is this important? And then what questions do I have, right? What are things that I want to come off of it? And it's really been a great way for me to organize my thoughts. And I've had to take some of my past note-taking systems, like I used to have a spiral notebook with me. I used to use Google Docs. And now when I've been transporting them, it's been this kind of really cool exploration where I'm refinding things and making these connections again. And it's really been an exciting thing. I know who would find note-taking this exciting, but it's something that I've really enjoyed to do and something I got to carve out a little bit more time to continue that process. But it's something that I've already seen benefits of, connecting things that I missed the connection previously about.
That's one of the areas that I'm always looking for efficiency hacks and to be good lazy in being able to take notes effectively, recall them, when I need them again, tie them together. I've been using Evernote for about 10 years, and it does an okay job of suggesting, oh, these things might also be related, but maybe I'll have to check out Obsidian too. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Underserved and sharing your stories and experiences with us.
I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you again.
And we'll talk to everyone soon on the next episode of Underserved.
Thank you for listening to the Underserved podcast. For more information on the topics discussed and for show notes, visit the show website, underserved.fm. And please be sure to rate, like, and subscribe to Underserved on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.